The marble floor of the Harrison County Courthouse didn't look dangerous. It looked expensive. It looked like justice. But for Callie Maxwell, 7 months pregnant and trembling with exhaustion, those stairs would become a crime scene. She thought the worst part of her day was facing her cheating husband, Richard, and his ruthless mistress, Carla, in a divorce hearing. She was wrong. She didn't see the hand reaching out. She didn't hear the gasp of the crowd until she was already falling. When a mistress tries to kill an unborn heir, she expects silence. What she didn't expect was the man walking through the front doors, a legal shark who hadn't spoken to his sister in 5 years. The air inside the Harrison County Superior Court smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and despair. It was a smell Callie Maxwell had grown nauseatingly accustomed to over the last 3 months. At 7 months pregnant, her back ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm that matched her heartbeat, but she refused to sit on the hard wooden benches outside courtroom 304. She stood near the heavy oak doors, one hand protectively resting on the swell of her stomach. She wore a modest navy maternity dress that had seen better days, a sharp contrast to the woman standing 20 feet away. Carla Vane, the mistress. Carla looked like she had just stepped off a runway in Milan. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Callie's car, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail. She was typing furiously on her phone, occasionally looking up to smirk at Callie. The audacity was breathtaking. Usually mistresses stayed hidden in the shadows, waiting in cars or apartments paid for by cheating husbands. But Carla wasn't just a mistress. She was Richard's business partner, and as of last week, the new vice president of strategy at Maxwell Core Industries. The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged, and Richard Maxwell strode out. He was a man who took up space, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jawline that graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. He was flanked by his attorney, Marcus Sterling, a man known in the city as the Undertaker, because he buried his opponents in paperwork until they suffocated. Richard didn't even look at Callie. He walked straight to Carla, placing a possessive hand on her lower back. They whispered something to each other, and Carla laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged hallway. "Mr. Maxwell?" Callie said, her voice shaking slightly. She hated that he still had this effect on her. "You're late. The judge is already reviewing the docket." Richard finally turned. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that had been there when they married 4 years ago. "I'm a busy man, Callie. Unlike you, I have a company to run. A company you're trying to bleed dry. I don't want your money," Richard Callie said, her grip tightening on her belly. "I want full custody. I want you to stay away from us. You and her." Carla stepped forward, clicking her heels on the marble. "Us? You mean the baby you're using as a bargaining chip? Let's be real, Callie. You can't afford a child. You can barely afford that dress." Callie felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "This is between my husband and me." "Ex-husband soon," Richard corrected, checking his Rolex. "And Carla is right. Marcus has drawn up the new papers. You sign the NDA, you take the lump sum of $50,000, and you give up primary custody. I'll allow you visitation on weekends. If you refuse, I will drag this out until the baby is in college. I will bankrupt you, Callie. You know I can." Callie looked at Marcus Sterling, the lawyer. He offered a sympathetic but hollow shrug. "It's a generous offer, Mrs. Maxwell. The court rarely looks kindly on unemployed mothers with no fixed address." "I have an apartment," Callie snapped. "A studio, but it's mine." "Paid for by your aunt," Carla sneered. "Pathetic." Callie took a deep breath. She had to stay calm for the baby. Her blood pressure had been high at her last checkup at St. Jude's Mercy Medical, and Dr. Orris had warned her about stress. "I'm not signing anything. My brother—" Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Your brother, the ghost. You haven't spoken to Julian in years. Last I heard, he was burying himself in corporate mergers in New York, trying to forget where he came from. Do you really think he cares about you? If he did, he'd be here." The words stung because they were true. Julian Thorne was a legend in the legal world, a prodigy who had passed the bar at 21. But after their parents died, Julian had shut down. He blamed Callie's husband Richard for isolating her. He had warned her not to marry Richard. When she did, Julian walked away. "He was right about you," Callie whispered. "What was that?" Richard stepped closer, looming over her. "Julian, he was right. You are a monster." Richard's face hardened. "Let's go, Carla. We're wasting time." They turned to walk toward the courtroom doors, but the bailiff stepped out. "Judge Holloway is taking a 15-minute recess. Please wait in the hall." Richard groaned in frustration. "Perfect. I have a board meeting at 2. He turned to his lawyer. "Marcus, go handle the clerk. See if we can get pushed up." Marcus nodded and slipped into the courtroom, leaving the three of them, the wife, the husband, and the mistress alone in the corridor near the grand staircase. The Harrison County Courthouse was an old building, a relic of the 1920s. The main feature of the second floor was the grand staircase, a steep, sweeping flight of marble steps that led down to the main lobby. It was beautiful architectural and currently very empty. Callie needed to sit. She felt dizzy. She walked toward a bench near the top of the stairs. "Look at her waddle," Carla muttered loud enough for Callie to hear. "Richard, are you sure it's yours? She looks sloppy." Callie stopped. She turned around, adrenaline overriding her fatigue. "You can have him, Carla. You deserve each other. But don't you dare talk about my child." Carla's eyes flashed. She wasn't used to being challenged. She was used to winning. She walked toward Callie, closing the gap until she was invading her personal space. Richard was on his phone, checking emails, willfully, ignoring the confrontation. "You think you're so noble." Carla hissed, her voice low and venomous. "But you're just an obstacle, a speed bump. And do you know what we do with speed bumps, Callie? We run them over." "Get away from me," Callie said, stepping back. She stepped back again. Her heel caught the edge of the top step. She wobbled her arms, flailing for purchase on the smooth air. She regained her balance, clutching her chest, terrified. "You're crazy." Carla smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who saw an opening. She glanced back at Richard. He was still typing, his back turned. The hallway was empty. The cameras were positioned near the courtroom doors, blind to the corner of the staircase. "Oops," Carla whispered, and then she lunged. It wasn't a shove of passion. It wasn't a frantic push. It was calculated. Carla's manicured hands pressed firmly against Callie's shoulders, applying just enough force to shift her center of gravity beyond the point of no return. Callie's eyes went wide. In that split-second time, didn't slow down. It shattered. She saw the gleam of triumph in Carla's blue eyes. She saw the diamond bracelet on Carla's wrist catch the overhead light. She saw her own life and the life of her unborn son hanging in the balance. "No!" Callie screamed. The sound ripped through the quiet hallway. She fell backward. Her hand grasped desperately for the railing, but her fingers slipped on the polished brass. The world tilted violently. The first impact was her hip, hitting the sharp edge of the marble step. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded up her spine. Then came the tumble. She rolled her body a rag doll against the unforgiving stone. "Protect the baby. Protect the baby." That was the only thought screaming in her mind. She curled inward, wrapping her arms around her stomach, tucking her chin. Thud. Her shoulder struck the stone. Thud. Her head bounced off the riser. Thud. She tumbled down 12 steep steps before coming to a rest on the mid-level landing. She lay there crumpled, her navy dress, twisted, her shoes missing. Silence. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then from the top of the stairs, a voice. "Oh my God, Richard. She fell. She just fell." It was Carla. Her voice was pitched perfectly to sound like a horrified bystander. Richard spun around, dropping his phone. He ran to the edge of the stairs, looking down. His face went pale. "Callie." Callie couldn't breathe. The wind had been knocked out of her. A warm, sticky wetness was spreading across her forehead, blinding her left eye. But the terror that gripped her wasn't for herself. It was the silence in her womb. The baby usually kicked when she was stressed. Now there was nothing. "Help!" she croaked, trying to move. A sharp agony in her leg made her cry out, "Help me!" "Call 911!" Richard yelled at Carla, stumbling down the stairs toward his wife. I am... Carla fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I tried to grab her. Richard." She just slipped. She was dizzy, and she fell. Richard reached Callie. He hovered over her, looking terrified, but he didn't touch her. He looked at the blood on the floor. He looked at her stomach. "Callie, can you hear me?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. "She pushed me," Callie whispered. Her voice was weak, barely audible over the rushing of blood in her ears. She looked Richard in the eye, gripping his expensive suit jacket with a bloodied hand. "She pushed me." Richard looked up at Carla, who was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down like a marble statue of victory. For a second, doubt flickered in Richard's eyes. But then self-preservation kicked in. "You're in shock, Callie," Richard said, prying her fingers off his jacket. "You slipped. I saw you stumble." "Liar!" she wheezed. "She pushed." Darkness began to encroach on the edges of her vision. The pain was becoming distant, a dull roar. She heard heavy footsteps running up the lower stairs. Security guards. "What happened here?" A deep voice boomed. "Officer Miller." Callie knew him. He worked the security checkpoint. "My wife," Richard stammered, standing up and wiping his hands on a handkerchief. She fainted. She fell down the stairs. "I pushed." Callie tried to say it louder, but the words were slurring. The darkness was winning. "Stay with us, Mum," Officer Miller said, kneeling beside her. "EMS is on the way." Callie's eyes drifted to the top of the stairs. Carla was still there. She wasn't looking at Callie anymore. She was looking at her phone, typing, deleting evidence, texting a lawyer, or just posting a status update. The last thing Callie felt was the cold stone against her cheek and the terrifying stillness inside her belly. The last thing she heard was Carla's voice, calm and collected, speaking to the police officer who had just arrived at the top landing. "She's been so unstable lately, officer, threatening to hurt herself if she didn't get what she wanted. I never thought she'd actually do it." No, Callie thought her mind fading into black. Not suicide. Murder. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and shouting. St. Jude's Mercy Medical Center was the best trauma center in the city, but it felt like a slaughterhouse to Callie. She drifted in and out of consciousness. Lights flashed overhead. Voices barked orders. "BP is dropping 80/50. Fetal heart rate is decelerating. We need an OB consult stat. Get the hybrid ore ready." She felt a mask over her face. Oxygen. She tried to fight it. She needed to tell someone. She needed a witness. "Carla," she mumbled into the plastic mask. "Save your strength, honey," a nurse said, stroking her hair. "We've got you." They wheeled her through double doors. The bright lights of the operating room blinded her. A man in scrubs loomed over her. "Dr. Orris." "Thank God." "Callie, we have to do an emergency C-section." Dr. Orris said, his eyes serious behind his surgical mask. "The baby is in distress. You have a fractured femur and a concussion. We need to move fast." "Save him," she whispered. "Please." "We're going to try. Count backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. As the anesthesia pulled her under, she had one final, crystal-clear thought. Richard and Carla were going to win. They had the money. They had the lawyers. They had the narrative. Callie was just the crazy hormonal ex-wife who threw herself down the stairs. She was alone. 2 days later, the beep of the heart monitor was the first thing to return. Constant, rhythmic, annoying. Callie opened her eyes. The room was dim. Her leg was in a cast, elevated. Her head was wrapped in bandages. Her entire body felt like one giant bruise. She panic-gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. It was flat, soft and empty. "No," she whimpered. The sound tore from her throat. "No, no, no." The door to her private room opened instantly. But it wasn't a nurse. It was a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal grey suit that fit him like armor. He had dark hair, greying slightly at the temples, and eyes that were the exact same shade of hazel as Callie's. He held a briefcase in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. He looked tired, but he also looked dangerous. The kind of dangerous that made CEOs sweat and judges sit up straighter. Callie blinked, thinking it was a hallucination from the drugs. "Julian." Julian Thorne walked to the side of the bed. He set the coffee down on the tray table. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He looked at her with an intensity that burned. "I told you," Julian said softly, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "I told you he would destroy you." Callie began to weep. "The baby. Julian, the baby. He's alive," Julian said. The air rushed back into Callie's lungs. He's in the NICU. 4 pounds, 3 ounces. He's fighting. He's got tubes everywhere, and he's small, but he's a thorn. We don't die easily." Callie sobbed with relief, her head falling back against the pillow. "Thank God." Julian pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He opened his briefcase. He didn't pull out grapes or flowers. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and a voice recorder. "Richard is holding a press conference in an hour," Julian said, his voice turning to steel. "He's spinning this as a suicide attempt. He's claiming you tried to kill yourself and the baby to punish him for the divorce. He's already filed for emergency sole custody of the child, citing your mental instability." Callie felt sick. He what? And that woman? Julian continued, his jaw tightening. "Carla Vane. She gave a statement to the police. She said you looked her in the eye and said, 'If I can't have him, no one can,' before throwing yourself down those stairs." Callie shook her head violently. "Lies. She pushed me, Julian. She smiled, and she pushed me." Julian froze. He looked at her, searching her face for any sign of confusion. "Say that again." "She pushed me. Richard saw it. He covered for her." Julian slowly uncapped a fountain pen. The look on his face shifted. The brotherly concern vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating precision of the country's most feared corporate litigator. "Richard saw it?" "Yes." "And he lied to the police?" "Yes." Julian took a deep breath. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked like a wolf who had just caught the scent of blood. "Good," Julian said, "because I was just going to sue them for negligence. But now I'm going to bury them." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "It's Thorne," he said into the phone. Cancel my meetings. Cancel Tokyo. I'm taking a leave of absence. Yes. Personal reasons. I'm in Harrison County. Send the jet with the team. I want the investigators, the forensic accountants, and I want the media team. We're going to war." He hung up and looked down at his sister. He gently touched her uninjured hand. "Rest, Callie. You focus on the baby. I'll handle the monsters." "What are you going to do?" she asked. Julian walked to the door. He paused, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. "I'm going to remind them who I am." The arrival of Julian Thorne in Harrison County was not subtle. It was atmospheric. It shifted the barometric pressure of the local legal ecosystem. He didn't check into a hotel. He rented the entire top floor of the Grand Harrison Hotel, converting the presidential suite into a war room that hummed with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a military strike team. Within 6 hours of leaving Callie's bedside, 3 people arrived on a private charter from New York. First was Sloane Orris, a forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar merger. She was small, sharp, and wore glasses that hid eyes that missed nothing. Second was Benji the Ghost. Miller, a private investigator who was a former NSA contractor. If it was digital, he could find it. If it was deleted, he could resurrect it. Third was Marcus, the Hammer. Vance, a jury consultant and media strategist who knew how to manipulate public opinion better than any politician. They gathered around a large mahogany table covered in schematics of the courthouse financial reports of Maxwell Core Industries and timelines of the incident. "Status," Julian barked. He was pacing by the window, looking out at the city that was currently eating up Richard Maxwell's lies. Benji spun his laptop around. "It's bad, boss. The courthouse security feed for the second floor gone. They're claiming a server migration error wiped the data from 1:0 p.m. to 2:0 p.m. on the day of the incident. Convenient." "Who manages the servers?" Julian asked. "A private security firm called Ironclad," Benji replied. "Their contract was renewed last month by the county, and guess who sits on the advisory board for the county budget committee that approved the contract? Richard Maxwell." Julian said, his voice low. "Bingo." "So we have no video of the push," Sloane added, tapping a pen against her lip. "And without video, it's he said, she said. And right now, she is a heavily medicated woman in the ICU, and he is Harrison County's golden boy." "Turn on the TV," Marcus Vance said, pointing the remote at the large screen on the wall. The local news was playing. A reporter stood outside the courthouse. "Shocking developments in the Maxwell case. Sources close to the family say that Callie Maxwell had been suffering from severe prenatal depression. Richard Maxwell, the CEO of Maxwell Core, issued this tearful statement moments ago." The screen cut to Richard. He looked devastated. He was wearing a rumpled shirt, no tie, a carefully calculated look of distress. Carla stood behind him, looking somber and supportive, the dutiful business partner. "I just want my wife to get the help she needs," Richard said to the cameras, his voice cracking. "I tried to save our marriage. I tried to support her. But when she stood at the top of those stairs, the look in her eyes, she just wanted to hurt me. She didn't care about our son. She just wanted to punish me." Julian picked up a crystal tumbler of water and hurled it against the wall. It shattered with a violence that made the room go silent. "He's burying her," Julian hissed. "He's painting her as a monster so he can pull the plug on her rights and take the baby." "He's filed for emergency custody," Sloane said, looking at an alert on her tablet. "Hearing is set for tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. He wants full legal guardianship of the infant Leo Maxwell. He's arguing that Callie is a danger to the child." "If he gets custody," Julian said, turning back to the group, "he controls the narrative. He controls the medical decisions. He could even block me from seeing the boy." "We need a win, Julian," Benji said. "We need something sticky." "Dig into Carla," Julian ordered. "I want to know where she shops, who she sleeps with, and what she was doing 5 minutes before that push. And Sloane tear Richard's finances apart. Men don't kill their wives just for a mistress. They do it for money. Richard is desperate. Find out why." The hospital, 2:00 a.m. Julian went back to the hospital. He couldn't sleep. He sat in the NICU looking through the glass at the incubator. His nephew Leo was tiny. He was a fragile collection of bones and translucent skin, hooked up to wires and tubes that looked too heavy for his small body. The rhythmic whoosh hiss of the ventilator was the only sound. "He looks like you," a voice said. Julian turned. It was Dr. Orris, the surgeon who had saved Callie. "He has the thorn chin," Julian said softly. "How is she?" "Stable physically," Dr. Orris said. "But emotionally she's shattered. She saw the news report. She saw Richard calling her crazy. He'll pay for that," Julian said. "Mr. Thorne." Dr. Orris hesitated. "I'm a doctor, not a detective, but I've treated falls before. Suicide jumpers. They usually hesitate. They have what we call hesitation injuries. Scrapes on the hands where they try to stop themselves at the last second, or they land feet first because instinct takes over." Julian turned fully to face the doctor. "And Callie?" "She landed on her back," Dr. Harris said quietly. "And her fingernails, 2 of them were torn backward. Ripped off." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Like she was clawing at something. Like she was trying to hold on to something," Dr. Harris corrected. "Or someone. I preserved the scrapings from under her remaining nails. I haven't sent them to the police lab yet. I didn't trust the chain of custody." Julian felt a surge of hope. "You have DNA?" "Maybe," Dr. Harris said, pulling a small sealed biobag from his pocket. "Or maybe just fibers. But if she scratched the person who pushed her..." Julian took the bag. It was the first weapon in his arsenal. "Dr. Harris." Julian said, "You just became my star witness." The courtroom for the emergency custody hearing was packed. Richard Maxwell had tried to have the hearing sealed, but Julian had pulled strings with the appellate court to keep it open. He wanted an audience. He wanted witnesses. When Julian walked in, the room went quiet. He wasn't wearing the standard navy blue of the local bar. He was wearing a black bespoke suit, a white shirt, crisp enough to cut glass, and a silk tie, the color of dried blood. He didn't carry a briefcase. He carried a single thin file folder. Richard sat at the petitioner's table, flanked by Marcus Sterling and Carla Vane. They looked confident. Why wouldn't they be? They had the judge, the money, and the lie. Judge Holloway banged his gavel. He was an older man known for being impatient and favoring local power players. "We are here for the matter of Maxwell versus Maxwell emergency custody of the minor child, Leo Maxwell." Judge Holloway announced, "Mr. Sterling, you may proceed." Marcus Sterling stood up. He was a smooth talker, a man who oozed false sincerity. "Your Honor." Sterling began, "This is a tragedy. A mother driven by hormonal imbalance and vindictiveness attempted to end her own life and the life of her unborn child. We have statements from the father, Mr. Maxwell, and a witness, Ms. Vane, confirming that Callie Maxwell threw herself down the stairs. The father simply wants to protect his son from a woman who is clearly a danger to herself and others." Sterling placed a stack of papers on the judge's bench. "These are affidavits regarding Mrs. Maxwell's erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to the incident." Judge Holloway nodded, peering over his glasses. "Mr. Thorne, I understand you are representing the mother." Julian stood up. He didn't move from his table. "I am, Your Honor, and I'd like to start by stating that the only erratic behavior my client exhibited was the audacity to ask for a divorce from a serial adulterer. A gasp rippled through the gallery. "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Relevance." "Sustained," Judge Holloway snapped. "Stick to the custody motion, Mr. Thorne." "The custody motion relies on the premise that my client attempted suicide," Julian said, his voice rising in volume. "If that premise is false, if she was in fact the victim of attempted murder, then the petitioner, Mr. Maxwell, is not a concerned father. He is a co-conspirator." "That is an outrageous accusation," Richard yelled, standing up. "Sit down, Mr. Maxwell," the judge ordered. He turned his glare on Julian. "Mr. Thorne, you are skating on thin ice. Do you have evidence for this claim, or are you just grandstanding?" "I have the father," Julian said calmly. "I call Richard Maxwell to the stand." Sterling looked nervous, but he couldn't stop it. Richard adjusted his jacket, shot a reassuring look at Carla, and walked to the witness stand. He was sworn in. Julian approached the stand. He didn't look at his notes. He looked directly into Richard's eyes. "Mr. Maxwell." Julian started, his voice deceptively soft. "You stated to the police that my sister Callie shouted, 'If I can't have him, no one can,' before she jumped. Is that correct?" "Yes," Richard said, his voice steady. "It was horrible." "And you were how far away from her?" "Maybe 10 feet. I was near the elevator." 10 feet, Julian repeated. "And Ms. Vane was with you?" "Yes, she was right beside me." Julian walked back to his table and picked up a piece of paper. "I have here the architectural blueprints of the courthouse, specifically the second-floor landing. The distance from the elevator to the top of the stairs is actually 25 feet. But the distance from the bench where Callie was sitting to the stairs is only 4 feet. Julian turned to the jury box, even though there was no jury. He was playing to the room. "If you were 25 feet away, Mr. Maxwell, how did you hear her whisper? Because in your police statement you said she whispered it, but just now you said she shouted it." Richard blinked. A bead of sweat formed on his temple. I might have misspoken. It was loud enough to hear." "Interesting," Julian said. "Let's talk about your finances, Richard. Is it true that Maxwell Core Industries is currently under audit by the IRS?" "Objection," Sterling roared. "Relevance." "It goes to state of mind, Your Honor," Julian countered smoothly. "If Mr. Maxwell is bankrupt, he can't pay alimony. If his wife dies, he gets her life insurance, a policy worth $2 million taken out 6 months ago. A policy, I might add, that he signed for her." "I am not bankrupt," Richard spat. "My company is fine." "Then why did you liquidate your 401k 2 days before the accident?" Julian asked, slamming a document onto the railing. "Why did you transfer $50,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands on the morning of the hearing?" Richard went pale. He looked at Carla. Carla looked away. Business expenses," Richard stammered. "Or a payoff," Julian suggested. "Maybe to a security firm to lose some footage." "Your Honor." Sterling was purple with rage. "This is speculation and slander." "I will sustain the objection," Judge Holloway said, though he looked at Richard with new suspicion. "Mr. Thorne, move on." "Very well," Julian said. He walked closer to Richard. "Let's go back to the stairs. You said you saw her jump. Did you see her hands?" "Her hands." Richard frowned. "I don't know. She was flailing." "Because Dr. Orris, the trauma surgeon, found something interesting," Julian said. He held up the bio bag containing the scrapings. He found skin cells under Callie's fingernails, deep under them, as if she scratched someone while trying to save herself. The room went deathly silent. Carla Vane, sitting in the front row, instinctively covered her left wrist with her other hand. Julian caught the movement. He didn't smile. He just stared at her. "Now, Richard." Julian said, his voice dropping to a predatory growl. "If we test this DNA, whose will it be, yours or maybe your mistress's?" Richard looked at the bag. He looked at Carla. He saw Carla covering her wrist. His eyes widened. He hadn't known she was scratched. He hadn't known about the DNA. I don't know," Richard whispered. "You don't know," Julian pressed. "Did you see Carla touch her? Did you see Carla push her?" "No, Richard looked at Carla again. He saw the fear in her eyes. And for the first time, Richard realized he was on a sinking ship. If he protected her, he went down for murder conspiracy. If he turned on her... "I was looking at my phone," Richard blurted out. "I didn't see it happen. I only looked up when she screamed." The courtroom erupted. Julian stood still in the chaos. "So you lied to the police? You stated you saw her jump. Now you say you didn't see it." "I assumed," Richard yelled, desperate. "Carla told me she jumped. I didn't see it." "So you perjured yourself to protect your mistress," Julian said, turning to the judge. "Your Honor, the petitioner has just admitted to filing a false police report and lying under oath. I move for immediate dismissal of his custody petition, and I request a recess to confer with the district attorney regarding criminal charges." Judge Holloway slammed his gavel. Order in this court." He glared at Richard. "Mr. Maxwell, you step down. Mr. Sterling, get your client under control before I hold you both in contempt." As Richard stumbled off the stand, Julian walked past the defense table. He stopped in front of Carla Vane. She was trembling. She still held her wrist. "Nice bracelet, Carla," Julian whispered. "But it doesn't cover the scratch marks. I'm coming for you next." The parking lot of the Harrison County Courthouse was sweltering the asphalt, radiating heat that matched the fury inside Richard Maxwell's luxury SUV. Richard slammed the door shut, trapping the cool air conditioning inside, but he couldn't shut out the panic. He loosened his tie, his hands shaking. "You didn't tell me she scratched you," Richard hissed, turning to Carla. "You let me walk into that trap. Julian Thorne made me look like an imbecile." Carla Vane was checking her makeup in the visor mirror, applying a fresh coat of blood-red lipstick. She didn't look rattled. She looked bored. "Calm down, Richard," she said, snapping the compact shut. "You panicked. You went off script. I didn't see it. Really, you just handed them a perjury charge on a silver platter." "I was trying to save myself," Richard shouted, hitting the steering wheel. "Thorne has DNA. If that skin under Callie's nails matches you, we are done. They'll charge you with attempted murder and me with accessory." Carla turned to him, her eyes icy blue and void of empathy. "They won't charge anyone, Richard, because DNA proves contact, not intent." "Of course, she scratched me. I tried to save her. Remember?" Richard stared at her. "What?" "That's the new narrative," Carla said, pulling her phone out. "She lunged at me. She was hysterical. I put my hands up to defend myself. She clawed my wrist, lost her balance, and fell. I'm not the villain, Richard. I'm the victim of a crazy woman's assault." "Thorne won't buy that." "Thorne doesn't have to buy it." Carla smiled. "The public does, and I have something that will make sure they do." She tapped her screen and hit send. The War Room, 5:00 p.m. The mood in Julian Thorne's suite was electric, but the celebration over the morning's victory was short-lived. "Boss, we have a problem," Benji Miller called out from his station. He had 3 monitors running, scanning social media and news outlets. TMZ just dropped a story. Headline: "The tragic note did Callie Maxwell plan her own fall." Julian froze. He walked over to the desk. "Read it." "It's an email," Benji said, scrolling. Supposedly sent from Callie's personal account to Richard 3 hours before the hearing. It reads, "I can't take this anymore, Richard. If you try to take the baby, I'll make sure neither of us has him. I'd rather be dead than let that woman raise my son." Sloane Arris gasped. That sounds like a confession." "It's a forgery," Julian said immediately. "Callie never calls the baby him to Richard. She calls him Bean or the baby. She didn't know the gender for sure until the birth. They kept it a surprise. Richard knew, but Callie didn't want to know. The public doesn't know that," Marcus Vance warned, pointing to the TV. "Look, the news is eating it up. The narrative is shifting. Now Callie isn't the victim. She's a Medea. A mother willing to kill her child to spite her ex." Julian grabbed his jacket. "Benji, I want the metadata on that email. I want to know where it was sent from, when it was created, and who logged into her account." Callie was in the hospital when that story leaked, but the email is time-stamped for yesterday. Time-stamped 10:00 a.m. yesterday. Benji corrected. "Before the fall. Hack it," Julian ordered. "Find the origin." "Where are you going?" Sloane asked. "I'm going to meet the source." Julian said, his eyes dark. "Carla Vane just declared war. It's time I looked the enemy in the eye." The Maxwell Corps headquarters. 6:30 p.m. Carla Vane's office was on the 40th floor, a glass box overlooking the city she intended to own. She was surprised when her assistant buzzed her voice, trembling. "Miss Vane, Julian Thorne is here. He says he doesn't need an appointment." The doors burst open before Carla could answer. Julian Thorne strode in, bringing a gust of cold energy with him. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked to the chair opposite her desk, sat down and crossed his legs. "Nice view," Julian said calmly. "Shame you won't be enjoying it much longer from a prison cell." Carla laughed, leaning back in her leather chair. "Mr. Thorne, I was wondering when the legendary Undertaker would show up. You're more handsome in person and more desperate." "The email is fake, Carla," Julian said, "and it's sloppy. You sent it from a VPN, but you forgot that Callie's email account has two-factor authentication linked to her old phone number, a phone number that's been disconnected for 3 months. She couldn't have verified the login to send it." Carla's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. "Technicalities. By the time your geeks prove that the jury pool will already be poisoned, they'll see an unstable woman. They'll see scratches on my wrist that prove she attacked me." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Here's the deal, Julian. You drop the lawsuit. You let Richard have custody. In exchange, we won't press charges against Callie for assault. We'll pay for her medical bills. We'll even give her a nice little allowance. She can move away, start over." Julian stared at her. He studied the way she held her pen, the dilated pupils, the arrogance. He realized then that she wasn't doing this for Richard. She wasn't even doing it for money. She was a sociopath. She was doing it because she wanted to win. "You think this is a game?" Julian said softly. "Isn't it?" Carla countered. "Rich husband, discarded wife, tragic accident. It's a tale as old as time. And the mistress always wins, Julian. Because we're willing to do what the wives won't." Julian stood up slowly. He placed both hands on her desk and leaned in until he was inches from her face. "You missed one thing, Carla." "And what's that?" "You didn't just hurt a wife," Julian said. "You hurt my sister, and I'm not playing a game. I'm hunting." He turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Carla. That fixer you hired to wipe the security footage, he didn't wipe the backup server in the basement. He didn't know it existed. My team is pulling the hard drive right now. Carla's face went white. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over. You're lying. Am I? Julian didn't look back. Check your phone. As Julian walked out, Carla scrambled for her cell. She dialed her contact at the security firm. No answer. She dialed again. Straight to voicemail. For the first time since the push, Carla Vane felt the cold hand of fear grip her throat. St. Jude's Mercy Medical Center. 3 days post-incident. The fog in Callie's mind was lifting. The pain was still there, a sharp, grinding ache in her leg and a dull throb in her head, but the confusion was gone. She opened her eyes and saw the sunlight streaming through the blinds. She saw the flowers on the table, and she saw Julian asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair, his head resting on his hand. Julian, she rasped. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Julian woke instantly. He was at her side, in a second, pouring water into a cup with a straw. I'm here. Drink slowly. She drank the cool liquid, soothing the fire in her throat. She looked at him, her eyes clear. Did you find it? Find what? Julian asked gently. The phone, Callie whispered. She was recording. Julian frowned. Carla, we know she was on her phone, but we thought she was texting. No, Callie said, shaking her head weakly. She was holding it up, like she was taking a selfie. But with me in the background. She wanted a picture of me crying, to show Richard later, to mock me. Callie's memory sharpened. She closed her eyes, replaying the horror. She held the phone up with her left hand, Callie said, and she pushed me with her right. But, Julian, when I fell, I grabbed her left hand, the one with the phone. Julian's eyes widened. You grabbed the phone hand. I felt it, Callie said. I felt the metal. I think I might have hit the screen. Or the button. Julian pulled out his own phone and texted Benji, stop looking for security footage. Look for Carla's cloud. If she was recording a video or a photo, Julian said, his mind racing, and you hit the screen, it might have taken a burst of photos or stopped the recording, but the file would be on her phone. She'll delete it, Callie said, tears welling up. She deletes everything. If she has cloud backup enabled, Julian said, a wicked grin forming, deleting it from the phone doesn't delete it from the server instantly. Not if we get a subpoena now. Just then the door opened. It was Detective Miller and a woman in a sharp suit, District Attorney Angela Halloway. Mr. Thorne, the DA said, we need to speak with your client. Julian stepped between them and the bed. My client is recovering from an attempted murder. Unless you're here to arrest Carla Vane, you can wait. We're not here to arrest Ms. Vane, Detective Miller said, looking uncomfortable. We're here to ask Mrs. Maxwell about the email. The suicide note, the DA clarified. We verified the IP address, Mr. Thorne. It came from the Maxwell residence Wi-Fi. Julian froze. The Maxwell residence. Of course. Carla had access to the house. She had gone there, logged into the Wi-Fi, and sent the email to frame Callie. It was smarter than he gave her credit for. Callie looked confused. What email? An email stating you intended to harm yourself and the baby, the DA said sternly. Mrs. Maxwell, did you write that? No, Callie cried, trying to sit up. I would never. I love my son. The timestamp matches a time when you were alone in the house, the DA pressed. And frankly, with the scratches on Miss Vane's wrist, the evidence suggests a mutual altercation or a suicide attempt where she tried to intervene. She is lying. Callie screamed, the heart monitor beginning to beep rapidly. She pushed me check her phone. She was taking pictures. Mrs. Maxwell, calm down, the nurse said, rushing in. Julian held up a hand. Enough. You want proof. You want to know who really sent that email. He turned to Benji, who had just walked in the door looking breathless. He was holding a tablet. Benji, Julian asked. I got it, Benji panted. I couldn't hack the email server legally, so I didn't. I hacked the house. The DA raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. The Maxwell house is a smart home, Benji explained rapidly. Everything is connected. Lights, locks, fridge. And the router logs every device that connects to it. At 10:00 a.m. yesterday, the time the email was sent, Callie Maxwell's phone was not connected to the Wi-Fi. It was at the grocery store. I have the GPS data. Benji turned the tablet around to show the DA. But, Benji continued pointing to a highlighted line of code. Guess whose device did connect to the network at exactly 9:58 a.m., a device labeled Carla's iPhone 15 Pro. The room went silent. The DA leaned in, adjusting her glasses. She was in the house, Julian said, his voice hard as granite. She logged in. She spoofed the email. And then she went to the courthouse to finish the job. Julian turned to the DA. That's burglary, fraud, and evidence of premeditation. Is that enough for a warrant, Angela? Or do I need to call the news station and give them the story first? DA Holloway straightened up. She looked at Detective Miller. Get a judge, she ordered. Get a warrant for Carla Vane's phone and her person. I want her brought in for questioning. And the baby, Julian asked. Richard still has temporary custody. Not for long, the DA said. If the father is covering for a suspect, he's an accomplice. We'll place the child in protective custody of the state until this is sorted. No, Julian said firmly. Protective custody of the uncle. I'm his blood relative. I'll take him. The DA looked at Julian, then at Callie, who was weeping silently in relief. Fine, Holloway said, but don't leave the city. As the police left, Julian sat back down on the bed. He took Callie's hand. We got her, Julian whispered. She made a mistake. She got arrogant. Callie squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. It's not over, Julian. She won't confess. She'll fight. Let her fight, Julian said, looking out the window at the city skyline. I prefer a moving target. But even as they celebrated the small victory, a breaking news alert flashed on the TV in the corner of the room. Breaking news. Maxwell Corps VP Carla Vane hospitalized. Julian grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Carla Vane was found unconscious in her office moments ago, the reporter said. Sources say it appears to be an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. She has been rushed to the same hospital where Callie Maxwell is recovering. Julian dropped the remote. She didn't overdose, Callie said, her voice trembling with a new kind of fear. She's planning something. Or she's trying to garner sympathy, Julian said, his eyes narrowing. She's trying to delay the arrest. She's coming here. He stood up and walked to the door, locking it. Benji, Julian commanded. Stand guard outside this door. Nobody comes in. Not a doctor, not a nurse, unless I clear them. Carla is in the building, and a cornered snake bites. The 4th floor of St. Jude's Mercy Medical Center was on lockdown. It was 3:15 a.m. when the elevator dinged and Richard Maxwell stepped out. He looked like a man whose soul had been repossessed. His suit was rumpled, his tie gone, and his eyes darted nervously toward room 402, where Carla Vane lay recovering from her overdose. Richard moved to pass, but Julian Thorne stepped out from Callie's room, blocking the hallway. She's lying, Richard, Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. But you know that. I need to see her. Richard pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. She told me she has proof it was an accident. Here is the proof we have, Julian countered, stepping closer. The DA pulled the smart home logs. We know Carla spoofed that suicide email from your house. That makes you an accessory to attempted murder, unless you give us the phone." Richard froze. "What phone?" "The one she gave you before the ambulance arrived." Julian said, his eyes boring into Richard. "She told you to destroy it, didn't she?" "Because it holds the truth. If you destroy it, you go to prison for 20 years and you never see your son again. Be a father for once, Richard." Richard looked at the door to his mistress's room, then at the door where his son lay in an incubator. He reached into his jacket pocket, his hand trembling, and pulled out a rose-gold iPhone with a cracked screen. "She took a picture." Richard sobbed, handing it over. "She sent it to her sister. The caption. God, the caption." Julian handed the phone to Benji, who had appeared from the stairwell. "Unlock it. Get the district attorney." The next morning, Carla Vane sat up in her hospital bed, handcuffed to the rail. She sneered at DA Angela Holloway. "You have nothing. I took a sleeping pill. The scratches were self-defense." "We have the photo, Carla," Julian said from the corner. Benji held up a tablet. It displayed a selfie recovered from the phone's deleted folder. It was taken from the top of the courthouse stairs. In the foreground, Carla was winking at the camera. In the background, blurred but unmistakable, was Callie, mid-fall, her face a mask of terror. The caption beneath it read, "Oops." "Bye-bye, Mummy." The color drained from Carla's face. The room fell into a deathly silence. Her narcissism had been her undoing. She had documented her own crime for clout. 6 months later, the gavel fell. The jury found Carla Vane guilty of attempted first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 25 years without parole. Richard Maxwell avoided prison by testifying against her, but he didn't escape justice. Julian orchestrated a hostile takeover of Maxwell Core Industries, stripping Richard of his CEO title and fortune. Richard was left with nothing, working a mid-level job in Ohio, sending child support checks that Callie promptly burned. On a sunny Saturday, Callie sat in the park, her leg fully healed. In her lap, 6-month-old Leo cooed, gripping a stuffed wolf. Julian sat beside them, loosening his tie. "I finished the paperwork." Julian smiled, watching his nephew. "Richard's old company is now a trust for Leo. I promised Mom and Dad I'd protect you. I'm never breaking that promise again." Callie rested her head on her brother's shoulder. The nightmare was over. They had won not just the case, but their future. "We're okay," she whispered. "Yeah," Julian replied. "We are. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with a sledgehammer. Carla Vane thought she could shove her way to the top, but she forgot the first rule of gravity. The harder you drop someone, the louder the impact when they hit back. Callie Maxwell survived the fall, but it was the bond between a brother and sister that truly broke the villains. This story reminds us that sometimes the monsters in designer suits are the most dangerous of all, and that family is the only shield that matters. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good legal thriller, and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold. Thanks for watching.